What if everything you've been taught about history is only half the story? For as long as humans have walked the earth, we've been haunted and enchanted by forces beyond our understanding. Whispers of gods walking among mortals, miracles defying logic, and encounters with beings not of this world echo through every civilization, every era. These aren't just campfire tales or fragments of forgotten folklore. They're threads woven into the very fabric of our past, pulling us toward a startling question. Could the supernatural divine be more than myth? Could it be history we've yet to fully unravel? Today, we're stepping into the shadows where time blurs and the impossible feels tantalizingly close. Across continents and centuries, 30 timeless tales defy explanation, each one a puzzle piece in humanity's oldest mystery. Picture an ancient city where statues bleed, a warrior king spoken to by the gods themselves, or a medieval village where the dead return with warnings. These stories aren't just eerie, they're doorways. Some were etched onto temple walls by trembling hands, others passed down through generations, guarded like sacred secrets. And here's what chills the spine. Many were recorded by historians, witnessed by thousands, even shaping the rise and fall of empires. What happens when myth leaves footprints in the dirt of the real world? This journey isn't about proving or disproving, it's about listening. Listening to the echoes of those who swore they touched the divine, who stood face to face with something beyond our comprehension. You'll hear voices from the past whisper of miracles and monstrous omens, of curses that outlived dynasties and blessings that defied death. Some will make your skin prickle, others might just make you wonder. Because whether these tales were misunderstandings, hoaxes, or something far stranger, they refuse to fade, and that alone demands our attention, so settle in. The line between history and myth is thinner than you think, and what waits on the other side will linger long after this video ends. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where the air hummed with something older than logic, a single woman held the fate of nations in her trembling hands. The Oracle of Delphi wasn't just a shrine. It was the beating heart of the ancient world, a place where kings and peasants alike begged for glimpses of the future. Picture this, a priestess, the Pythia, seated atop a tripod above a crack in the earth, breathing in vapors that twisted her words into prophecy. The Greeks called it divine madness. But what if the gods weren't the only forces at work? Modern scientists uncovered eerie clues beneath those crumbling temple stones. Fissures in the bedrock seeped ethylene, a gas known to induce trances, a cocktail of geology and divinity. When the Pythia inhaled it, her voice dropped to a rasp, her body convulsed. Was this possession or chemistry? Yet the real mystery isn't how she prophesied, but how often she was right. Take Croesus, the richest king of Lydia, who asked if he should wage war on Persia. Her reply, "If you cross the river Hollies, a great empire will fall." He did, it did his own, a warning so precise it still chills historians today. But Delphi's power wasn't just in accuracy, it was in ambiguity. The Pythia spoke in riddles, a language of smoke and mirrors. "You will not be conquered unless the Medes come bearing a king on a mule," she told Athens before Persia's invasion. They laughed until Cyrus's army arrived with mules carrying supplies. Were these prophecies clever wordplay or something far stranger? Even Alexander the Great, the conqueror who scoffed at limits, came seeking the oracle's blessing. When she refused to see him on an unappointed day, he dragged her from the chamber by her hair only for her to sigh, "You are invincible, my son," a phrase that would fuel his legend. The temple's influence stretched beyond politics. It shaped philosophy, war, even the Olympics. Cities built treasuries at its feet, stacked with gold and ivory as offerings. Why? Because Delphi wasn't just a place to hear the future. It was where mortals touched the currency of fate, and perhaps that's the most haunting truth of all. Long after the last priestess fell silent, her whispers cling to history, demanding we ask, Were these visions madness, manipulation, or moments when the veil between worlds truly thinned? The desert sands of Egypt had guarded their secrets for 3,000 years until the afternoon Howard Carter's chisel broke through plaster and into darkness. "Can you see anything?" his patron Lord Carnarvon whispered. Yes, Carter breathed. Wonderful things, gold, jewels, a boy king's face staring back through time. Tutankhamun's tomb was the archaeological find of the century, but within months the celebration turned to terror. Because the world wasn't just witnessing a discovery, it was awakening a curse. At least, that's what the newspapers screamed when Carnarvon died just weeks later. A mosquito bite on his cheek turned septic, his body failing as Cairo's lights mysteriously flickered out. By morning, the press had their headline, "Pharaoh's Curse Kills Tomb Robber." Then the deaths piled up. A radiologist who X-rayed the mummy succumbed to an unknown illness. Carnarvon's half-brother dropped dead from blood poisoning. Even his dog howled and died the same night. By 1929, 11 people linked to the excavation were gone. Coincidence? The public didn't think so, but here's where history gets slippery. No curse was actually found inscribed in Tutankhamun's tomb, at least not the Hollywood version we imagine. Egyptologists point to a far older tradition, protective spells meant to deter thieves, not unleash supernatural vengeance. "Death shall come on swift wings to those who disturb the peace of the king," reads one common inscription from other tombs. Yet Carter himself lived another 16 years, dying of natural causes at 64. So why did the legend stick? Science offers grim alternatives. The tomb's sealed chambers bred toxic molds like aspergillus, capable of ravaging lungs. Ancient embalming resins might have released lethal spores when disturbed. Then there's simple probability. Over 24 people entered the tomb initially. Statistically, some were bound to die young, but statistics don't sell papers. When media magnate William Randolph Hearst caught wind of Carnarvon's death, his journalist spun every misfortune into lurid front-page doom. The curse became a self-fulfilling prophecy, fueled by an era obsessed with spiritualism after the horrors of World War I. Yet skeptics can't explain everything. Why did Carnarvon's friend Sir Bruce Ingham's house burn down after receiving a mummy's hand as a paperweight? Why did financier George J. Good die of pneumonia after merely visiting the tomb? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between hysteria and something older, darker. Because curses, real or imagined, hold power. The moment Carter held up his lamp to glimpse Tutankhamun's gold, he did more than expose artifacts. He exposed our hunger for mystery, our need to believe that the past isn't quite finished with us. And in that sense, the curse worked perfectly. It never let go. The streets of Strasbourg simmered under the July sun in 1518, the air thick with the scent of sweat and fear. It began with a single woman, Frau Trophia, twisting her body in unnatural jerks, her feet pounding the cobblestones as if pulled by invisible strings. Within days, dozens joined her, then hundreds, their limbs flailing in a grotesque parody of celebration. They danced until their shoes split open, until blood pooled beneath their toenails, collapsing from exhaustion only to rise and writhe again when the music played. The city's physicians bled them, priests prayed over them, but the frenzy only spread. This was no festival, it was a plague, one that defied every law of nature. What force could make bodies move against their will? Some claimed divine wrath. Strasbourg had endured famine, its poor starving while the wealthy hoarded grain. Perhaps God had sent this torment as punishment. Others whispered of Saint Vitus, the patron of dancers, whose curse was said to strike those who angered him. The city council's solution: more dancing. They built stages, hired musicians, even brought in professional dancers to guide the afflicted, a disastrous gamble that only fed the mania. Modern science offers darker theories. Ergot, a toxic fungus that grows on damp rye, can cause convulsions and hallucinations. In small doses, it's the source of LSD. In large ones, it triggers violent spasms. Could tainted bread have sent Strasbourg into delirium? Yet ergot poisoning doesn't explain why so many danced in perfect unison, their movements oddly coordinated. That's where mass psychogenic illness enters the story, a contagion not of the body but of the mind. Under extreme stress, communities can literally think themselves into sickness. Witness the Tanganyika laughter epidemic of 1962 or the mysterious twitching outbreaks in modern schools. Fear is a virus, and Strasbourg was ripe for infection. But the most chilling detail, the dancers didn't just move, they screamed. Contemporary accounts describe their cries as not of joy but of terror, as if they were prisoners inside their own bodies. Whether by poison, panic, or something beyond our understanding, the plague left an indelible mark. By September, it vanished as suddenly as it began, taking dozens of lives. Today, we dismiss it as medieval superstition until another dancing case erupts somewhere in the world, a reminder that the line between mind and mystery is never as solid as we pretend. In the quiet farmlands of early 19th century Tennessee, a nightmare took root in the Bell family's home, one that would etch their name into the annals of supernatural history. It began innocuously, scratching on the walls, blankets yanked from sleeping children, faint whispers in the dark, but soon the disturbances escalated. Bedposts rattled like thunder, invisible claws raked across skin, and a voice emerged, a voice that called itself Kate. She knew family secrets no stranger could guess, sang hymns in uncanny harmony, and spat venom at John Bell in particular. The Bell Witch wasn't just a ghost, she was a presence with a personality, a vendetta, and a cruelty that defied explanation. John Bell's fate became the haunting's grim crescendo. After years of torment, he collapsed, his mouth frothing with a mysterious liquid. The family found a small vial of dark liquid in the medicine cabinet, a substance Kate had boasted was her doing. When John died the next day, the voice cackled through the house proclaiming victory. Even the local doctor who'd signed the death certificate listed the cause as supernatural visitation. But the witch wasn't finished. She attended John's funeral herself, her laughter ringing through the burial party as pallbearers struggled to lower the coffin, as if unseen hands pushed against it. Then came Andrew Jackson, the future president, a hardened war hero, arrived with armed men after hearing rumors of the haunting. According to legend, their wagon halted inexplicably miles from the farm. "The witch has us," a soldier muttered. By the time Jackson reached the house, his skepticism had shattered. After a night of objects flying and spectral shrieks, he reportedly declared, "I'd rather fight the entire British army than face that witch again." But here's where historians divide. Jackson's personal papers never mention the incident, leaving room for doubt. Was his encounter embellished by locals, or did the general keep silent to avoid ridicule? The Bell Witch's legacy thrives because it straddles the line between hoax and horror unlike any other case. Modern paranormal investigators point to the sheer volume of eyewitnesses, neighbors, clergy, even enslaved workers on the plantation, all reporting identical phenomena. Could the entire community have conspired in an elaborate fraud? Perhaps. But then there's Betsy Bell, John's youngest daughter. In her later years, long after the haunting ended, she still refused to speak of it, her hands shaking at the mere mention of Kate's name. That terror, etched decades later, feels like more than just the residue of a prank. It feels like the mark of something that knew them, something that hated. And that's what lingers, not the debates or the doubt, but the unshakable question. If it was all a lie, why did the lie cut so deep? The coast of present-day North Carolina should have been a safe harbor for the 115 souls who landed there in 1587. John White, governor of the Roanoke colony, left them to fetch supplies from England, a journey delayed by war, storms, and the fickle tides of history. When he finally returned 3 years later, the settlement was empty. Not a soul remained, no signs of struggle, no graves, just two eerie clues carved into wooden posts, the letters CR and the full word Croatoan. No cross, their prearranged signal for distress, just those cryptic letters hanging in the air like an unfinished sentence. For centuries, the word Croatoan has taunted historians. It could point to Croatoan Island, home to a Native American tribe allied with the settlers. Some believe the colonists, starving and desperate, integrated with the tribe, a theory later supported by reports of fair-skinned, English-speaking natives in the region. Others whisper of darker fates, Spanish raiders from Florida, or a violent clash with local tribes. But if conflict took them, where are the bodies, the weapons? The scorched earth, the absence of evidence, is its own kind of riddle. Then there are the indigenous accounts. The Lumbees, a tribe in North Carolina, have long claimed ancestry from the lost settlers. Their oral histories speak of white ancestors who arrived generations before, blending into their communities. DNA studies in recent years show tantalizing traces of European lineage in Lumbee families dating back to the 16th century, though skeptics argue this could stem from later contact. Still, the parallels are unnerving. Modern archaeology hasn't closed the case, but it's unearthed provocative clues. X-ray scans of a patch of land near Roanoke revealed a mysterious blob beneath the soil, possibly remnants of a palisade or fort. Fragments of English pottery turned up 50 miles inland, far from the original settlement. And in 2020, researchers found a ring bearing the crest of a 16th century English master, buried near an ancient Native American village. Each artifact is a breadcrumb hinting at a story we've only begun to piece together. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't what happened to the Roanoke colonists, but why their disappearance still grips us. Other settlements vanished without legend, but Roanoke endures because it feels like a locked door in history's hallway, one we're still fumbling for the key to. Every few years, a new theory emerges: drought, disease, even supernatural abductions. But the truth, if it's ever found, will likely be stranger than any fiction. Because history's greatest mysteries aren't just about facts. They're about the silence between them, the gaps where our imaginations rush in, wondering what waits in the dark. The sea has always been a keeper of secrets, but few are as chilling as the stories of ships that sail without souls. Two legends tower over all others: the Flying Dutchman, a ghostly vessel doomed to haunt the waves forever, and the Mary Celeste, a brigantine found drifting silently in 1872. Its crew vanished as if plucked from existence. One is a phantom cursed by the divine, the other a blank page in history's ledger scribbled with theories but devoid of answers. Together they form the perfect storm of maritime mystery. First, the Dutchman. Sailors have whispered its name since the 17th century, a spectral ship with tattered sails glowing against the fog. According to legend, Captain Hendrik van der Decken, desperate to round the Cape of Good Hope in a storm, swore an oath to sail until Judgment Day, even if it meant defying God himself. The heavens took him at his word. Now, spotting the Dutchman is said to bring doom. Kings and cabin boys alike claim to see it, from Prince George of Wales in 1881 to Nazi U-boat crews in World War II. But here's what chills the bones. Many sightings describe the ship passing through solid objects, its crew skeletal yet forever in motion. Science offers mirages as explanation: fata morgana, a trick of light bending over the horizon. Yet how do we explain the reports from veteran sailors who knew every natural phenomenon the sea could conjure? Then there's the Mary Celeste, found adrift near the Azores, her sails still set, her cargo of industrial alcohol untouched. A half-eaten meal sat on the table, a child's doll rested on a bunk. The crew's personal belongings remained, their boots lined up neatly as if waiting for owners who'd return any moment. Only the lifeboat was missing, along with the ship's papers and navigational tools. No signs of struggle, no storms in the logbook, just silence. Theories erupted like geysers. Pirates, unlikely, nothing was stolen. Mutiny, then why abandon a perfectly sound ship? Some pointed to the alcohol fumes, suggesting a fearful crew evacuated, expecting an explosion that never came. Others spun tales of sea monsters or waterspouts, but the most haunting detail, the captain of the ship that found her, David Morehouse, was a close friend of the Mary Celeste skipper, Benjamin Briggs. A coincidence or something stranger? Even Arthur Conan Doyle, years before creating Sherlock Holmes, penned a fictional account blaming, of all things, a vengeful ex-slave. What binds these tales together isn't just their eeriness, but what they reveal about us. The Dutchman is myth made manifest, a warning against hubris, a story so potent it shaped centuries of art and superstition. The Mary Celeste is the opposite, a void, a riddle with no satisfying answer. One reminds us of the sea's ancient power to punish, the other of its capacity to erase. And perhaps that's why they endure, because in their contrast they capture the two faces of the ocean, the known terror of the cursed and the far more unsettling terror of the utterly unexplained. In the candlelit gloom of his Provencal study, quill scratching across parchment, Michel de Nostradamus penned verses that would outlive empires. The 16th century physician-turned-seer wrote nearly 1,000 quatrains, 4-line poems so dense with metaphor they've become a Rorschach test for the ages. To some, they're pure charlatanism, to others, uncanny glimpses of futures he couldn't possibly have known. But here's what's undeniable. Nostradamus has been predicting world events for nearly 5 centuries, with each generation finding fresh horrors in his lines. Take the quatrain many link to Adolf Hitler. From the depths of Western Europe, a young child will be born to poor people, who by his tongue will seduce a great multitude. The parallels are jarring: Hitler's humble origins, his mesmerizing oratory. Yet skeptics counter that the prophecy could fit dozens of historical figures. That's the trick of Nostradamus. His verses are like storm clouds. You can see any shape if you stare long enough. Then there's the September 11th connection. Earth-shaking fire from the center of the earth will cause tremors around the new city, reads one passage, while another mentions 2 steel birds striking the great city. Eerie, absolutely. Definitive, not quite. The new city could mean New York, Novum Yorkum in Latin, or Naples, or even Constantinople. And Nostradamus' original French used feu du centre de la terre, a fire from the Earth's center, which alchemists interpreted as volcanic activity. His method was less crystal ball than collage. As a trained physician during the Black Death, Nostradamus blended Hippocratic medicine with Hermetic astrology, believing celestial patterns mirrored earthly events. He baked his prophecies in a cauldron of sources: the Bible's book of Revelation, classical myths, even contemporary gossip. By writing in a mix of French, Latin, Greek, and anagrams, Hister, instead of Hitler, he created a linguistic labyrinth where meaning shifts with every turn. What makes Nostradamus endure isn't accuracy, it's adaptability. His quatrains are like skeleton keys, fitting whatever lock we press them to. The Cold War saw his Great King of Terror interpreted as nuclear war. Today, it's applied to pandemics or AI. This elasticity reveals less about Renaissance mysticism and more about us. We crave patterns, especially in chaos. When planes hit the Twin Towers or a dictator rises, we scour old texts not to see the future, but to feel like it was always knowable. That's Nostradamus' real prophecy, humanity's endless hunger to believe that somewhere someone saw this coming, yet buried in the noise is a spine-tingling possibility. Among countless misfires, some lines feel too precise to dismiss as luck. The great man will be struck down in the day by a thunderbolt, he wrote, a possible nod to President Kennedy's daylight assassination. Another quatrain describes the great ship sailing by night, sinking with all hands lost, mirroring the Titanic's fate 3 centuries later. Coincidence? Probably, but in a universe where lightning sometimes strikes the same spot twice, who's to say Nostradamus didn't glimpse, just once or twice, a flicker of what lay ahead? In the high desert of northern New Mexico, beneath skies so clear they seem to hum themselves, a sound with no source has tormented the town of Taos for decades. It starts faint, a distant engine, a fridge left running, but for those who hear it, the Taos hum soon becomes inescapable. A low-frequency vibration in the bones more than the ears, thrumming through walls at night, vanishing by dawn only to return when least expected. Scientists have swept the area with microphones and seismographs. Psychologists have studied the hearers. Yet after half a century, no one can explain why 2% of the population perceives this ghost in the machine while others hear nothing at all. The first documented report surfaced in the early 1990s, though locals insist it's been there far longer. Descriptions vary, some compare it to a diesel truck idling blocks away, others claim it pulses like a subwoofer through concrete. What's consistent is its elusiveness. Teams from MIT, the University of New Mexico, even the national laboratories in nearby Los Alamos have failed to capture definitive audio evidence. This absence of proof birthed competing theories. Could it be underground seismic activity, the groan of shifting tectonic plates, or industrial equipment like the massive power lines cutting through the desert? Some point to the town's unique geography, a bowl-shaped valley that might amplify distant sounds, while others whisper of military experiments at secret bases just over the mountains. Then there's the human factor. Researchers discovered that most hearers are between 50 and 70 years old, with heightened sensitivity to low-frequency sounds. This led to theories of mass auditory pareidolia, the brain's tendency to find patterns in noise, like hearing voices in static. But why Taos? Why this one community? Skeptics note the town's history as a counterculture hub, attracting artists and spiritual seekers predisposed to embrace the unexplained. Yet that doesn't account for lifelong residents, pragmatists who woke one day to the unshakable sense that the air itself had begun singing. What makes the hum truly uncanny is its intersection with Taos's other legends. The region has long been a hotspot for UFO sightings, with reports of strange lights dancing over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Local Pueblo tribes speak of underground spirits and portals to other worlds. Even the town's name, derived from the Tiwa word meaning place of red willows, hints at something older beneath the surface. Some hearers insist the hum isn't mechanical, it's alive. They describe it as the Earth's own frequency, a sound that predates humanity, now growing louder as if trying to tell us something. The deeper you dig, the more the hum reflects our own anxieties. In an era of surveillance tech and hidden infrastructure, it's easy to fear we're hearing the hidden machinery of the modern world. Or perhaps, like the sailors who once mistook whale songs for mermaids, we're straining to pass a natural phenomenon through the narrow filter of human experience. Either way, the hum lingers not just in Taos, but in dozens of towns worldwide from Bristol to Bondi. A reminder that even in our mapped and measured world, some frequencies defy explanation, vibrating in the space between science and myth. The first scream tore through Point Pleasant, West Virginia, on a cold November night in 1966. Two young couples, parked near an abandoned munitions plant, swore they saw it. A 7-foot figure with massive wings and eyes like burning coals, gliding between the trees without a sound. By morning, the town buzzed with talk of a birdman, but this was no local legend catching fire. Over the next year, more than 100 people would encounter the creature they called Mothman, a being whose appearances seemed to herald something far darker than anyone could imagine. What makes these sightings so unsettling isn't just the descriptions, though those alone chill the blood. Multiple witnesses, from factory workers to sheriff's deputies, reported the same impossible details: wings spanning 10 feet, a hunched humanoid shape, and those terrifying, radiant eyes that seemed to pierce the dark. One couple claimed it pursued their car at 60 miles per hour without flapping its wings. A farmer found his German shepherd cowering in a corner, its metal food bowl shredded as if by claws no animal could possess. Even more bizarre, the creature often appeared near electrical transformers, leaving locals to wonder if it fed on voltage like some modern-day vampire. Then came the bridge. On December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge, Point Pleasant's vital Ohio River crossing, collapsed during rush hour, sending 46 cars plunging into icy water. 46 people died. In the wreckage, investigators found a single cracked eyebar, a tiny flaw that shouldn't have doomed the entire structure. Some whispered Mothman had been seen perched on the bridge's cables that very afternoon. Others recalled a strange detail. The creature's sightings had abruptly stopped just days before the tragedy. Coincidence, maybe, but when journalist John Keel arrived to investigate, he uncovered something stranger still. Townspeople confessed to prophetic dreams, visions of disaster, of water and screaming metal in the weeks leading up to the collapse. Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies, would later suggest the creature wasn't just a cryptid but a harbinger. A warning from the unknown. Science offers mundane explanations. Sandhill cranes, native to the region, stand 5 feet tall with red facial markings, easy to misidentify in low light. Mass hysteria, fueled by Keel's own fascination with UFOs and the supernatural, could have amplified ordinary events into legend. Yet even skeptics pause at the sheer volume of independent accounts, many from credible witnesses with no motive to lie. And why did every sighting cluster in those 13 months, never to recur with such intensity? Mothman's legacy endures because it taps into something primal, the fear that nature, or something beyond it, might still hold terrors we can't classify. Today, Point Pleasant embraces its phantom with a bronze statue and an annual festival. But beneath the celebration lingers an unshakable question. If Mothman was real, was it trying to save those people or simply waiting to watch them fall? The forests around Salem Village in 1692 weren't just thick with pine, they were choked with fear. It started with 2 girls, 9-year-old Betty Paris and her cousin Abigail Williams, convulsing like animals, screaming words no child should know. The local doctor, baffled, declared the only possible cause witchcraft. What followed wasn't just panic, it was a firestorm of accusations that would see 19 people hanged, 1 pressed to death under stones and hundreds jailed. But beneath the screams and gallows ropes lies a question that still haunts historians. What truly poisoned Salem? Some point to the bread. Puritan families subsisted on rye, a grain prone to ergot fungus, the same toxin linked to the dancing plagues of Europe. In high doses, it causes muscle spasms, hallucinations, even a sensation of crawling skin. Could the girl's affliction have been mycotox in induced madness, spreading like gossip through a starving, stressed community? Others argue the roots were societal. Salem was a tinderbox of land disputes and church politics, with the Paris family at its center. When their slave Tutuba, an outsider with Caribbean roots, confessed under pressure to consorting with the devil, she unwittingly gave the village a scapegoat. The accusations that followed didn't target random women. They zeroed in on the poor, the quarrelsome, those who'd refused to conform. Across the Atlantic, 12 years before Salem, another witch hunt unfolded in Lancashire's Pendle Hill, but with a chilling difference. Here, the accused weren't random victims of mass hysteria. They were named from the start. The Pendle witches were a real family, the Devices, entangled in local feuds and known for selling charms. When 80-year-old matriarch Elizabeth Southerns, aka Old Demdike, boasted of her powers during a bitter dispute, she sealed her family's fate. The trial was orchestrated by a ruthless local official, Thomas Potts, who weaponized the accusations of a 9-year-old girl, Elizan Device, against her own kin. Her testimony, likely coerced, sent 10 people to the gallows. The contrast between Salem and Pendle reveals 2 faces of witch panic. Salem's was wildfire, consuming everything in its path, neighbors turning on neighbors with little logic beyond whispered rumors. Pendle's was calculated, a weapon wielded by the powerful against the vulnerable. Both, however, share a grim through line, the voices of children igniting the flames. From Abigail Williams' spectral visions to Elizon Device's damning words, youthful testimony became the spark that burned lives to ash. Perhaps the most haunting parallel is what came after. In Salem, the hysteria died as suddenly as it began, leaving survivors to grapple with guilt. Judge Samuel Sewall publicly apologized, calling for days of fasting and repentance. In Pendle, the Device's legacy was reduced to tavern tales, their home demolished stone by stone. Today, we dismiss these events as superstition until we remember how easily fear still twists facts into weapons, how quickly the marginalized are blamed when a community trembles. The witches of Salem and Pendle weren't supernatural monsters. They were mirrors reflecting the darkest corners of the societies that condemned them. The morning of June 30th, 1908, began like any other in the remote taiga of Siberia until the sky split open. At 7:17 a.m., a fireball brighter than the sun blazed across the horizon, followed by an explosion so colossal it registered on barometers in England. Reindeer herders 40 miles from the blast were thrown from their feet, tents ripped away by a shockwave that circled the globe twice. When scientists finally reached the site years later, they found 80 million trees flattened like toothpicks over 800 square miles, their trunks pointing away from ground zero in a grotesque sunburst pattern. But the most baffling detail, no crater, just a silent, scorched forest where something from beyond our world had left its mark, then vanished without a trace. For over a century, the Tunguska event has been the Rosetta Stone of cosmic mysteries. The leading theory points to a stony meteoroid or comet fragment exploding 3 to 6 miles above the Earth, an airburst with the force of 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, hundreds of times more powerful than Hiroshima. The lack of a crater, that's where physics steps in. When a cosmic object enters Earth's atmosphere at hypersonic speeds, the compression heats it to tens of thousands of degrees. If it's fragile like an icy comet, it can disintegrate catastrophically before impact, releasing all its energy in a single, crushing blast wave. Trees directly below would be stripped of branches but left standing, while those farther out would topple like dominoes, exactly what researchers documented. Yet the comet theory doesn't explain everything. Eyewitnesses describe the object maneuvering mid-flight, changing direction like a pipe rolling across the sky. Some accounts mention multiple explosions, suggesting a controlled detonation rather than a random collision. These anomalies birthed wilder speculations: a crashed alien spacecraft, a Tesla energy experiment gone awry, even a microscopic black hole passing through Earth. The absence of meteorite fragments only fueled the fringe theories. Expedition after expedition scoured the area, finding only microscopic glass spheres, possible remnants of vaporized cosmic rock, but nothing definitive. Then there's the eerie aftermath. In the days following the blast, night skies across Europe and Asia glowed so brightly people could read newspapers outdoors at midnight. Scientists now attribute this to ice crystals high in the atmosphere, reflecting sunlight from dust ejected by the explosion. But for conspiracists, it's evidence of something stranger, a dimensional rift, or perhaps a failed alien propulsion system leaking energy. Even the forest's regrowth raised questions. Trees near ground zero showed accelerated mutation rates for decades, as if irradiated by an unknown force. The truth may lie in the middle. Recent simulations suggest the object could have been an iron-rich asteroid that mostly vaporized, leaving no large remnants. Others propose a grazing impact, a body skimming the atmosphere at a shallow angle, like a stone skipping across a pond, detonating before it could carve a crater. But until another event of this scale occurs, and we have instruments in place to study it, Tunguska remains a cosmic Rorschach test. It challenges our assumptions about how the universe interacts with our fragile planet, reminding us that sometimes the most profound mysteries leave no trace but the scars on our imagination. In a quiet vault at Yale University's Voynich Library rests a book that has defied understanding for 6 centuries. The Voynich Manuscript, a 200-page tome from the early 15th century, is written in a script no linguist has ever cracked, packed with illustrations of plants that don't resemble any known species, and filled with astronomical charts that map no recognizable constellation. Its vellum pages whisper with ink that refuses to give up its secrets, making it the most stubborn puzzle in the history of the written word. At first glance, the manuscript looks like a medieval herbal guide or alchemical text. But the moment you peer closer, the uncanniness sets in. The plants aren't just unfamiliar, they're impossible. Tubular roots spiral in unnatural geometries. Leaves branch in fractal patterns no botanist has documented. Then there are the nymphs, naked female figures bathing in what seem to be interconnected pools of green liquid, their bodies oddly elongated, their purpose indecipherable. Even the script itself is a nightmare for codebreakers. 25 to 30 unique characters, arranged in patterns that mimic language but follow no known grammatical rules. It's as if the author invented not just a code but an entirely alien way of thinking. World War II's greatest cryptographers have tried and failed. The team that cracked Japan's purple cipher, the minds behind the Enigma machine, all turned their skills to the Voynich and walked away baffled. In 1951, a CIA cryptanalyst named William Friedman, who'd revolutionized modern codebreaking, assembled a team to tackle it as a pet project. After years of analysis, they conceded defeat. Even the NSA, with its supercomputers and linguistic algorithms, couldn't find meaningful patterns in the text. The most advanced statistical analyses show the manuscript does have the rhythm of a real language, just not one we've ever seen. Skeptics argue it's an elaborate hoax, likely concocted by 16th-century occultist Edward Kelly to swindle Emperor Rudolf Roman II, who reportedly paid 600 gold ducats for it. Carbon dating, however, confirms the vellum is from the early 1400 centuries before Kelly's time. Others suggest it's glossolalia, the ramblings of a schizophrenic or mystic channeling nonsense. But that doesn't explain the meticulous illustrations, the careful organization into sections herbal, astronomical, biological, or the fact that the text's word entropy matches genuine linguistic structures. Theories spiral into the fantastical. Could it be a lost language like the extinct Manchu dialect of the Jurchen people, a proto-constructed language akin to Tolkien's Elvish? More radically, some propose it's an artifact from a parallel timeline or extraterrestrial contact, a field guide for Earth's flora and fauna, written by someone who'd never actually seen them. The most compelling recent hypothesis comes from botanist Arthur Tucker, who claims some plants resemble species from colonial-era Mexico, suggesting the manuscript might be a rare surviving document from pre-Spanish Mesoamerica, transcribed by a European hand. What keeps scholars obsessed isn't just the mystery, it's the manuscript's eerie resistance to time. Most hoaxes crumble under modern scrutiny, the Voynich only deepens. Every decade, some new theory emerges only to be dismantled. Yet the book endures, its pages pristine, its message hovering just beyond reach. Perhaps its true power isn't in what it says, but what it represents. The human hunger to solve, to decode, to believe that given enough time, every riddle yields. The Voynich manuscript whispers back, not this one, not yet. The morning of January 15, 1947 began like any other in Los Angeles, until a mother pushing her stroller through a vacant lot spotted something pale among the weeds. What she thought was a discarded mannequin was Elizabeth Short, bisected at the waist, her face slashed ear to ear in a grotesque Glasgow smile. The press dubbed her the Black Dahlia, a nickname spun from her rumored preference for dark clothing, and the film The Blue Dahlia still playing in theaters. But this wasn't just a murder. It was a tableau so horrifically staged it seemed designed to sear itself into the public psyche and ignite decades of obsession. From the start, the case pulsed with dark energy. Short's body had been drained of blood, scrubbed clean with surgical precision. Her killer posed her legs apart, arms raised over her head like a macabre ballet dancer. Most chilling of all, a slit carved from the corners of her mouth, mirroring the comic book Joker's grin years before the character existed. The LAPD was flooded with over 50 confessions, including one from a man who mailed Short's belongings to newspapers with letters cut and pasted from magazine clippings, a taunt straight from a horror novel. Yet despite hundreds of suspects, from doctors to butchers to a teenager who later claimed his father did it, the case froze into legend without an arrest. Then the whispers began. Rumors swirled that Short had ties to the occult, that her murder mirrored an ancient ritual sacrifice. Occult expert William Rasmussen posited the killing bore hallmarks of a Thuji ceremony, a cult that worshipped Kali, the Hindu goddess of destruction. Others noted the bisected body echoed Masonic symbolism, or pointed to the killer's apparent anatomical knowledge as evidence of a black magic practitioner versed in human dissection. Even the placement of the body near the intersection of 39th and Norton, a street named for a Puritan martyr, fueled theories of religious fanaticism. But the LAPD's own shadows deepened the mystery. Files vanished, key witnesses died under suspicious circumstances. Decades later, retired Detective Steve Hodel would accuse his own father, George Hodel, a physician linked to surrealist circles and investigated for another grisly murder. A recording surfaced of the elder Hodel snarling, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now." Yet with evidence tainted by time and institutional secrecy, the truth remains as elusive as ever. What makes the Black Dahlia endure isn't just the brutality, it's the way the case refracts through every layer of American darkness. The seedy glamour of old Hollywood, where starlets like Short were both predator and prey. The rot beneath post-war optimism, where a killer could exploit a city's distractions. And the birth of true crime as spectacle, where victimhood becomes myth, and myth becomes a mirror for our own fascination with the unsolved. Elizabeth Short was a woman. The Black Dahlia is a story we're still writing one gruesome chapter at a time. The ocean has always been a place of mystery, but two patches of water, one in the west, one in the east, have become synonymous with vanishing acts. The Bermuda Triangle, stretching from Miami to Puerto Rico to Bermuda, and the Devil's Sea, a stretch of the Pacific near Japan, share eerily similar reputations. Ships, planes, even entire crews evaporate without distress signals, leaving behind only whispers and conspiracy. Yet behind the legends lies a far more fascinating truth. Science and statistics may hold the real answers if we're willing to listen. Start with the Bermuda Triangle. Christopher Columbus himself reported strange compass fluctuations here, an early clue to the area's unique geology. Modern research confirms weak magnetic anomalies, remnants of ancient volcanic activity that can disorient instruments, but the real culprit might lurk beneath the waves. Vast methane hydrate deposits trapped under the seabed can erupt without warning. When these bubbles reach the surface, they lower water density so drastically that ships lose buoyancy and sink within seconds, no time for mayday calls. Sailors in the North Sea have witnessed this phenomenon firsthand, watching vessels plunge like stones. Then there's the Devil's Sea, Japan's answer to the Triangle. Here, typhoons and underwater volcanoes churn the waters unpredictably. The Kuroshio Current, one of the strongest on Earth, drags debris far from wreck sites, erasing evidence. Japanese lore speaks of phantom lights and dragon palaces beneath the waves, but scientists point to a simpler explanation: human error. The region sits atop the Pacific Ring of Fire, where tectonic shifts create rogue waves tall enough to snap freighters in half. Fishermen tell of walls of water appearing from nowhere, a force nature never meant us to challenge. Yet the greatest myth isn't supernatural, it's statistical. Lloyd's of London, the world's leading maritime insurer, confirms disappearance rates in these zones match global averages. What's different? Volume. The Bermuda Triangle sees heavy traffic. More ships mean more accidents. As for vanished planes, the triangle's busy flight corridors ensure that when a craft goes down, as Flight 19 did in 1945, it becomes legend rather than tragedy. The real mystery isn't why things disappear here, but why we're so determined to make their stories extraordinary. Perhaps that's the allure. These vortices live where science meets the sublime, where every radar blip could be a storm or something stranger. We've mapped the Earth, yet these waters remind us some truths still slip through our nets. Not everything that vanishes is lost, and not everything unexplained is unknowable. Sometimes the deepest mysteries aren't in the ocean, but in our need to believe they're more than water and wind. The Enfield house on Green Street seemed ordinary enough until August 31, 1977, when 11-year-old Janet Hodgson levitated above her bed. That night, furniture started sliding across the floor untouched. Marbles hurled themselves at walls, and a voice unlike any child's rasped from Janet's throat, claiming to be Bill Wilkins, an elderly man who died in the home years before. What followed wasn't just a haunting, it was a media circus, a clash between hardened skeptics and convinced investigators, and a case so polarizing it would redefine paranormal research forever. Listen to the tapes and your skin crawls. The voice, deep, guttural, spitting profanities, seemed impossible for a girl Janet's age to produce. British paranormal researcher Maurice Grosse recorded hours of it, capturing moments where Bill described his own death from a brain hemorrhage in chilling detail. At one point, he even identified a hidden neighbor by name, someone the Hodgson family swore they'd never met. But the most unnerving detail, the knocking. 3 distinct raps, a signature poltergeist trope, would answer questions in real time, as if something unseen stood in the room, listening. Enter the skeptics. Magician and professional debunker James Randi famously dismissed the case as childish pranks, pointing to footage where Janet appeared to throw a chair herself, albeit with bizarre, almost convulsive movements. Psychologists suggested Janet and her sister Margaret might have been subconsciously acting out due to their parents' recent divorce, their trauma manifesting in physical chaos. Then there were the inconsistencies. Some witnesses reported objects moving when no one was looking, while others caught the girls giggling mid-disturbance. Even Maurice Grosse admitted some events felt staged, but insisted others defied explanation. What gives the Enfield poltergeist lasting power isn't its purity as a supernatural event, but its messy humanity. Unlike pristine horror films, this was real life, full of bored kids, exhausted parents, and opportunistic reporters. The Hodgsons weren't perfect victims, they were a struggling working-class family thrust into an international spotlight. And that's where the story twists. Whether you believe it was demons, deception, or something in between, Enfield exposes our hunger for the supernatural to be either irrefutably real or easily debunked. Reality, as usual, refuses to pick a side. Hollywood certainly didn't. The Conjuring 2 fictionalized the case, amplifying the horror but preserving its core tension, the terror of losing control of your voice, your home, even your own children. Because at its heart, Enfield isn't about ghosts. It's about the fear that the walls we build between the possible and impossible are far thinner than we dare admit. And sometimes, whether through tragedy, trickery, or something beyond our understanding, those walls come crashing down. Everywhere the shadow falls, there he walks, a figure gaunt and hollow-eyed, his feet worn raw from centuries of motion. The legend of the Wandering Jew first slithered into medieval Europe in the 13th century, a cautionary tale spun from cruelty and fear. According to the myth, a Jewish shoemaker named Ahasuerus stood watch outside Jerusalem as Jesus stumbled toward Golgotha under the weight of the cross. When Jesus paused to rest against the man's door, Ahasuerus taunted him to move faster. In response, Christ delivered his chilling verdict, "You will walk until I return." And so, the legend claims, the man began an endless journey, doomed to outlive every generation, watching empires rise and crumble, never permitted the mercy of death. But peel back the layers and a darker truth emerges. The tale didn't spring from scripture. It was born in the fevered sermons of monks during the Crusades, a tool to stoke hatred against Jewish communities. By casting Judaism itself as eternally exiled, the story justified persecution. In 1828, historian Jacob Basnage traced over 40 variations of the myth, each more venomous than the last. Some claimed the wandering Jew carried a coin from Judah's betrayal. Others said his wounds reopened annually on Good Friday. The message was clear: to be Jewish was to be cursed, a scapegoat for Christ's death. Yet something unexpected happened. The figure escaped his propagandist origins, evolving into a literary archetype that haunted Gothic fiction. Percy Shelley cast him as a tragic seeker in his poem, The Wandering Jew. Matthew Lewis, in his scandalous novel The Monk, wove the cursed wanderer into a tale of damnation and desire. Even Eugene Sue's serialized 19th-century epic Le Juif Errant transformed him into a symbol of oppressed resilience, though the title alone, with its loaded language, revealed how stubborn the original bigotry remained. The myth's grip on artists reveals a paradox. While the wandering Jew began as a weapon, he became a mirror reflecting humanity's terror of immortality, its guilt over persecution, and its longing for redemption. Jorge Luis Borges captured this duality in his short story, The Immortal, where a man who cannot die muses, "Death changes men more than life." That's the haunting core of the legend. Whether read as allegory or anti-Semitic slander, The Wandering Jew forces us to confront an uncomfortable question: who truly bears the curse, the man condemned to walk, or the society that invented him to justify its own cruelty? The wind howled through the Ural Mountains on that February night in 1959, biting cold enough to freeze breath in midair. 9 experienced hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, pitched their tent on the slopes of Kholat Syakh, Mountain of the Dead, in the local Mansi language. They never made it home. When search teams finally reached their campsite weeks later, they found a scene so bizarre it sparked decades of speculation. The tent had been slashed open from the inside. Footprints led away into the snow, some barefoot, others wearing just socks, as if the group had fled in terror. Their bodies were scattered across the frozen wilderness, some with skulls crushed, others with ribs snapped inward with what experts later described as force comparable to a car crash. But the most chilling detail: one hiker was missing her tongue, her eyes, her lips, as if something had plucked them out. Avalanche, that was the official Soviet explanation. A rush to close the case that left more questions than answers. If an avalanche struck, why was the tent still standing, its contents neatly arranged? Why did some victims show traces of radiation on their clothing? And how did 2 of the hikers suffer injuries typically seen in high-speed impacts, yet their bodies showed no external trauma? The deeper investigators dug, the stranger the case became. One victim had fatal internal bleeding but no broken skin. Another's head was wrapped in a woolen scarf soaked with blood from massive facial injuries never fully explained. Then there were the reports of orange spheres spotted in the sky that night, noted in other hikers' diaries and declassified Soviet documents. Secret military tests offer one plausible thread. The region was known for missile experiments, and some theorists argue the hikers stumbled onto a classified operation involving unconventional weapons, perhaps infrasound devices or parachute mines that could explain both the internal injuries and radiation. Others point to the indigenous Mansi people's tales of vengeful spirits guarding the mountain. But the most compelling modern theory comes from scientists who reconstructed the event in 2021. Their simulations suggest a rare slab avalanche, a sudden, deadly shift of snow layers could have created enough pressure to fracture bones without burying the tent. As for the missing tongue, nature's gruesome answer, scavenging animals drawn to soft tissue first, yet even this explanation leaves gaps. Why did some hivers' clothing contain elevated levels of radioactive isotopes? Why did Soviet authorities initially seize the case files, declaring them classified until the 90s? The Dyatlov Pass Incident endures not because it defies all logic, but because it sits at the crossroads of so many possibilities: natural, military, even otherworldly. Like all great mysteries, it holds up a mirror to our need for answers, and sometimes the reflection staring back is far more unsettling than any solution. What if history itself could be forged not through rewritten texts but through missing time? The phantom time hypothesis doesn't just question events, it erases entire centuries, suggesting the years between 614 and 911 AD never existed. German historian Herbert Illig proposed this radical theory in the 1990s, pointing to gaps in archaeological records, suspiciously aligned astronomical data, and the rapid spread of the Romanesque architectural style. His conclusion: Holy Roman Emperor Otto III and Pope Sylvester II conspired to fabricate 300 years, backdating documents to legitimize their rule by placing themselves in the year 1000 for symbolic power. On paper, it sounds absurd, but when you examine Charlemagne's reign, often called the Dark Ages for its lack of concrete evidence, the questions grow louder. Why do so few artifacts survive from this period? Could calendar reforms and political maneuvering have created a collective illusion? Then there's the eerie echo of false memory. In 2010, thousands swore the beloved children's book series was spelled Berenstein Bears, not Berenstain. Others vividly recall Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, despite his very public presidency, and passing in 2013. These collective misrememberings, dubbed the Mandela effect, have spawned theories ranging from flawed human cognition to glitches in the simulation of reality. But what if these phenomena are connected? Phantom time suggests history can be edited on a grand scale. The Mandela effect implies our personal timelines might be just as malleable. Both force us to confront the unsettling idea that time isn't a fixed thread, but a tapestry with loose threads, ones that might unravel under scrutiny. Science pushes back, of course. Dendrochronology tree ring dating shows continuous growth patterns spanning the missing centuries. Chinese and Arabic records from the same period document events like the Tang dynasty's golden age and the rise of Islam. Yet the phantom time hypothesis lingers because it taps into a deeper fear, that the past is a story we've agreed to tell, not an absolute truth. Meanwhile, psychologists explain the Mandela effect through confabulation, where our brains fill gaps with plausible details. But when thousands misremember the same non-existent Shazam movie starring Sinbad, or the Monopoly man's monocle, he never had one, the line between neurology and metaphysics blurs. Perhaps these aren't separate mysteries, but two sides of the same coin. One suggests time itself can be altered, the other implies our memories might betray us or glimpse truths from alternate timelines. Whether through conspiracy, collective delusion, or cosmic error, both phenomena whisper the same unsettling question: how much of history, even our own, can we really trust? Cold sweat still clings to the name Amityville, not just because of the ghouls the Lutz family claimed haunted them, but because of the very real blood that soaked the floors before they ever set foot in that Dutch colonial house. On November 13, 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered his parents and 4 siblings in their sleep, later claiming voices in the house drove him to it, a plea that earned him 6 life sentences but left an unsettling question hanging in the air. Were those voices just the ravings of a killer, or something darker? Because 1 year later, when George and Kathy Lutz moved in with their 3 kids for 28 terrifying days, they swore the house wasn't empty. What makes Amityville so divisive isn't just the hauntings, it's the haunting doubt. The Lutz's tale had all the hallmarks of a gothic nightmare: slamming doors, green slime oozing from walls, Kathy levitating above her bed, and an invisible force that allegedly lifted George's body off the floor. Their priest, Father Ray, claimed holy water sprinkled in the house sizzled like acid, but skeptics pounced fast. Ed and Lorraine Warren, famed paranormal investigators, declared the house a portal to hell, yet even they admitted they never witnessed phenomena firsthand. Then came the money. The Lutzes sold their story within weeks, sparking rumors of a hoax. Former friends revealed George had bragged about faking events, while a lawyer involved admitted the family embellished details to secure a book deal. Yet the DeFeo murders resist easy dismissal. Crime scene photos show eerie parallels between the family's claims and the house's violent past. The Lutzes reported a red-eyed pig named Jody tormenting their daughter. DeFeo's sister had owned a pig statuette in her room, found shattered after the murders. They heard marching band music at 3:15 a.m., the exact time DeFeo later said the killings occurred. Even the infamous window eyes, those demonic glowing portals from the book's cover, aligned with where DeFeo claimed to see figures watching him. Coincidences, perhaps, but the unsettling truth is this: Amityville's horror lies in the space between proven fraud and the unshakable weight of what happened before the Lutzes ever arrived. Science offers rational explanations. The house sat on a water table, causing pipes to groan and floors to warp, sounds easily twisted into ghostly whispers by suggestible minds. Carbon monoxide poisoning, notorious for inducing hallucinations, was never ruled out. Yet none of this explains why subsequent owners also reported disturbances, or why forensic experts found no evidence of the hoax the Lutzes were accused of orchestrating. Maybe the real horror isn't whether the house was haunted, but why we're so desperate to believe or disbelieve in the first place. After all, Amityville endures not because it's the scariest ghost story, but because it's the perfect mirror. It reflects our need to turn trauma into tale and our fear that some houses, like some memories, never really let go. Harvest season in 12th century Suffolk should have been a time of plenty, until the villagers of Woolpit stumbled upon two children trembling at the edge of a wolf pit, their skin the color of moss, their clothes woven from an unknown material, speaking a language no one recognized. The green children of Woolpit weren't just oddities, they were a riddle wrapped in the inexplicable. According to chronicler William of Newburgh, the boy and girl refused all food until someone offered them raw beans, which they devoured with desperate hunger. As weeks passed, their skin lost its eerie hue, they learned English, and they revealed a chilling story. They came from a twilight world where the sun never rose, a place they called St. Martin's Land. Then the boy sickened and died. The girl, however, adapted, even working as a servant before fading into obscurity. But what really emerged from that pit? Alien visitors, lost refugees, or a folktale so potent it outlived its origins. The refugee theory holds surprising weight. Woolpit lay near Thetford Forest, a known hiding place for Flemish immigrants persecuted under King Henry II's reign. Their greenish complexion, historians suggest malnutrition, specifically chloroses, a form of anemia that tints the skin pale green combined with a diet heavy on unripe or foraged foods. Their clothing, described as unfamiliar, could have been Flemish wool. As for their bizarre language, medieval Flemish dialects would have been unintelligible to Anglo-Saxon villagers. Even the name, St. Martin's Land, fits. St. Martin was the patron saint of numerous Flemish churches. The children might have been survivors of a massacre, disoriented and starving, their memories twisted by trauma into tales of an underground realm. Yet the extraterrestrial angle refuses to die. Ancient astronaut theorists point to the children's claims of a sunless world. Could this describe a planet orbiting a dim star or even a subterranean civilization? Their initial rejection of all food except beans has been compared to accounts of alien abductees struggling with human digestion. The green skin, some argue, might imply copper-based blood, a concept straight from science fiction. Even their sudden appearance near a pit, a possible portal or crash site, fuels speculation. But here's the catch: medieval chronicles are riddled with symbolic language. Green often represented the otherworld in Celtic myth, a liminal space between life and death. Could the story be an allegory for purgatory or fairy abduction, common themes in 12th century folklore? Perhaps the most fascinating twist lies in the story's endurance. Unlike most medieval oddities, the Green Children appear in two independent chronicles, William of Newburgh's and Ralph of Coggeshall's, written within decades of the event. This unusual corroboration suggests something extraordinary did happen in Woolpit, even if the details blurred over time. The tale's power isn't in proving aliens or fairies, but in exposing how even the most mundane tragedies, war, displacement, starvation, can transform into myth when viewed through the lens of fear and wonder. The children may have been Flemish, but their story became something far stranger, a mirror held up to humanity's endless hunger to explain the unknown, no matter how far the explanation strays from earthbound logic. In the dim candlelight of a 15th century German monastery, two men penned a book that would drown Europe in blood. The Malleus Maleficarum, Latin for the Hammer of Witches, wasn't just a theological treatise. It was a blueprint for terror, a so-called manual that turned suspicion into conviction and fear into flames. Published in 1486 by Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Sprenger, this text weaponized superstition, targeting women with such vicious specificity that historians now call it the first documented case of institutionalized gendercide. At its core, the Malleus was a grotesque paradox. It claimed to protect Christendom from Satan's influence, yet its logic dripped with the very paranoia it claimed to combat. Women, it declared, were feeble-minded and carnally insatiable, making them Satan's preferred vessels. Midwives, widows, and healers, those existing outside male authority, were singled out as prime suspects. The book even provided absurd tests for witchcraft, like weighing a suspect against a Bible or searching for devil's marks, moles, or scars deemed proof of demonic pacts. Confessions weren't just encouraged, they were engineered through torture so brutal that victims often chose death over enduring another session. The Malleus didn't invent witch hunts, but it systematized them with chilling precision. Courts across Europe adopted its guidelines, turning local grudges into death sentences. In the German town of Trier alone, 368 witches were burned in just 2 decades. The manual's influence seeped into colonies. Two Salem's trials in 1692 echoed its rhetoric, with preachers like Cotton Mather citing Kramer's work. Yet the darkest irony, the Catholic Church initially condemned the Malleus for its reliance on dubious theology. Too late, the genie was out of the bottle and it smelled of smoke and screaming. Modern scholars dissect the text like a crime scene. Anthropologist Margaret Murray traced its roots to pre-Christian fears of female power, while feminist theologians highlight how it pathologized women's autonomy. Even linguistics betray its agenda. The Latin Maleficarum specifically feminizes the word witch, while male sorcerers were largely ignored, but perhaps the most unsettling legacy lies in its endurance. The same tactics, demonizing the marginalized, weaponizing fear, still surface in modern persecutions, from pogroms to moral panics. The Malleus wasn't just a relic of medieval cruelty. It was a mirror reflecting how easily authority can dress hatred in holy robes, and how long those robes can stain history. Christmas Eve, 1945, should have been like any other for the Sodder family of Fayetteville, West Virginia, until flames tore through their home in the dead of night. George and Jenny Sodder managed to escape with 4 of their children, but 5 others, Morris, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, vanished without a trace. The official explanation, a tragic house fire, their bodies reduced to ashes too fine to recover. Yet from the moment dawn broke over the smoldering ruins, nothing about this story added up. The Sodder children's disappearance wasn't just a tragedy. It was a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing, and the ones left behind pointed to something far more sinister than an accident. Start with the fire itself. When investigators sifted through the debris, they found something baffling. The children's bones should have survived. House fires rarely exceed 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, while human bones require nearly twice that heat to fully disintegrate. Even more troubling, no dental remains were recovered, despite the fact that tooth enamel can withstand temperatures over 2000 degrees. Then there was the coal stove blamed for sparking the blaze. Fire marshal conclusions shifted suspiciously, first ruling it electrical, then later claiming the family had left a smoldering ember unattended, an accusation George Sodder vehemently denied. But the anomalies didn't stop there. Witnesses reported seeing strange figures lurking near the house that night. A neighbor swore she heard a loud bang before the fire started, consistent with an explosive, not an electrical malfunction. Phone lines had been cut earlier in the evening, and when George tried to drive his lumber truck to fetch help, the engine wouldn't start. Later inspection revealed the battery had been removed. Most haunting of all, the family received a photograph years later, a blurred image of a man who might have been their missing son Louis, now grown, with a cryptic note, Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie, are you I all? Theories spiral from negligence to conspiracy. Some believe the children were snatched by human traffickers, pointing to rumors of a local black market for adoptions. Others suspect a vendetta. George, an outspoken Italian immigrant, had clashed with townsfolk over his criticism of Mussolini. Could someone have targeted his family in retribution? Even the FBI took interest, though their files remain heavily redacted. But perhaps the most unsettling question isn't about who took the children, it's why no one in authority seemed to care. The case was closed within days, the rubble bulldozed before proper forensic analysis. Decades later, the Sodder house remains a wound that never healed. Soil samples taken in the 2000s revealed no trace of human remains, further undermining the official narrative. Yet without definitive proof, the truth drifts like smoke, visible but impossible to grasp. What lingers isn't just grief, but the gnawing sense that sometimes disappearance isn't an accident. Sometimes it's a meticulously planned crime hiding in plain sight, and the only thing burning is the evidence. Deep in the shadowy pine barrens of New Jersey, where the trees twist into gnarled shapes and the mist never seems to lift, a legend took flight in 1735, one that would haunt American folklore for centuries. They called it the Jersey Devil, a nightmare stitched together from the worst parts of every creature you've ever feared. Witnesses described leathery wings stretching 10 feet across, a horse's head with blazing red eyes, and a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the swamps like a dying rabbit. The story goes that a cursed woman, Mother Leeds, birthed her 13th child during a storm, and as it took its first breath, it transformed into something not of this earth. But here's where history gets slippery. Newspapers of the era show no record of a Leeds family in the area, and the earliest tales paint the creature as more ghost than beast, a portent of doom, not a physical monster. So how did this regional boogeyman evolve into one of America's most enduring cryptids? Flash forward to the muggy nights of 1995 on an island 1,000 miles south. Puerto Rico's farms became hunting grounds for something far smaller but no less terrifying. The chupacabra, Spanish for goat sucker, left a trail of drained livestock in its wake, their bodies puncture marked by 2 precise holes near the neck, completely devoid of blood. Early reports described a reptilian humanoid with spines down its back and glowing eyes. Later sightings morphed into hairless, dog-like beasts, their origins blurring with each retelling. Unlike the Jersey Devil's slow burn mythos, the chupacabra exploded overnight, spreading through Latin America and the southern U.S. like a viral nightmare. But where the Jersey Devil was a solitary specter, the chupacabra became a phenomenon, a shape-shifting enigma, adapting to the fears of every community it visited. What makes these two legends so fascinating isn't just their grotesque details. It's how they reveal the machinery of myth itself. The Jersey Devil is folklore incubated over generations, stewing in isolation like a fine and terrifying wine. Its story grew richer with time, absorbing elements from Native American legends and colonial superstitions. The chupacabra, by contrast, was a product of the modern age, its image disseminated through tabloids and early internet forums, mutating faster than any biological creature could. Both, however, thrived in moments of societal tension. The Leeds Devil's earliest spikes in sightings coincided with economic despair in rural New Jersey, while the chupacabra emerged during Puerto Rico's struggle with industrialization and environmental upheaval. Science offers its own lenses. For the Jersey Devil, skeptics point to misidentified sandhill cranes, massive birds whose silhouettes in flight could explain the winged descriptions. The chupacabra's victims, likely the work of ordinary predators, with post-mortem bloating creating the illusion of drained carcasses. Yet neither explanation accounts for the visceral terror these creatures inspire or why their legends outlast rational debunking. Perhaps the real terror isn't in the creatures themselves, but in what they represent: the Jersey Devil, a relic of America's colonial anxieties, and the chupacabra, a modern monster for an era of globalization and disappearing rural identities. The truth might be simpler still. Cryptids endure because they give form to our oldest fear that no matter how much we map the world, something unknown still lurks just beyond the light. The Jersey Devil whispers from the 18th century, the chupacabra hisses from the 20th. Both remind us that every era gets the monsters it deserves. The night of August 15, 1977, was just another shift for Jerry Amon, a volunteer astronomer scanning the stars with Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope. Then, halfway through his data review, he spotted a sequence so startling he scrawled, "Wow," in red pen across the printout, a burst of radiation so intense, so precise, it defied every natural explanation. For 72 seconds, the universe seemed to scream directly at Earth on a frequency hydrogen atoms naturally emit, 1,420 megahertz, the cosmic calling card scientists had long theorized aliens might use. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the signal vanished, never to repeat. What made the wow signal so electrifying wasn't just its strength, 30 times louder than background noise, but its structure. It occupied a narrow band of the radio spectrum, exactly what you'd expect from an artificial transmitter. Unlike natural cosmic static, which smears across frequencies, this was a laser-focused blip, rising and falling in intensity as the telescope's fixed dish drifted past its source, peaking for exactly 72 seconds before fading. The shape of that curve matched a signal from deep space passing through the telescope's field of view, not earthly interference or equipment glitches. Even more haunting, the frequency itself, hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe, is the scientific equivalent of shouting, "We're here," into the void. Yet the silence that followed has tormented researchers for decades. Over 4 decades of targeted searches, no one has ever heard it again. Some argue it was a one-time event, a comet's hydrogen cloud briefly reflecting sunlight, though none were recorded in that patch of sky. Others suggest a military satellite, but declassified records show no known spacecraft operating on that frequency. The most unsettling possibility: the signal was deliberate, a fleeting hello from a civilization that either moved on, went dark, or isn't inclined to repeat itself. SETI Hunt has only intensified since, deploying algorithms to sift through millions of frequencies simultaneously. Projects like Breakthrough Listen Now scan 10 billion channels at once, chasing echoes of that elusive wow. Yet the signal's ghost lingers, a reminder that our search for cosmic neighbors might hinge on moments as brief as a heartbeat here, then gone, leaving us to wonder if we just missed the call of a lifetime. The Shroud of Turin lies at the crossroads of science and devotion, a 14-foot linen cloth bearing the ghostly imprint of a crucified man, his wounds mirroring the Gospel's account of Jesus' torture. Since its first documented appearance in 1354, this relic has sparked one of history's most heated debates. Is it the genuine burial shroud of Christ or an elaborate medieval forgery? The answer depends on which lab you ask and which century's technology you trust. In 1988, 3 independent teams carbon-dated samples from the shroud's edge, their results clustering between 1260 and 1390. For many, this was case closed, a medieval artist's handiwork, not a first-century artifact, but critics pounced on flaws in the sampling. The tested fibers came from a corner repeatedly handled over centuries, potentially contaminated by smoke, oils, and even repairs after a 1632 fire. The Vatican, which guards the shroud, quietly noted that carbon dating had misdated other ancient textiles before, sometimes by millennia. Then came the bombshell of 2018. Researchers using state-of-the-art spectroscopy analyzed the shroud's outermost pollen grains and mineral traces, finding compounds common in first-century Jerusalem but rare in medieval Europe. Even more startling, the image itself isn't painted, no brushstrokes, no pigments. The faint photo-negative-like imprint penetrates only the topmost fibers, as if produced by a brief, intense burst of radiation, a phenomenon science still can't fully replicate. Italian chemist Giulio Fanti's mechanical tests suggested the cloth could be 2,000 years old, based on degradation patterns unseen in medieval linens. But how was the image made? Some propose a primitive photography technique. Leonardo da Vinci's name often surfaces, though he was born a century after the shroud's first appearance. Others suggest a chemical reaction between ammonia from a corpse and spices used in Jewish burial rites. Then there's the divine hypothesis that the resurrection itself unleashed energy powerful enough to scorch the cloth. Even NASA engineers weighed in, noting the image's 3-dimensional data density resembles a radiation burn, something no medieval forger could conceptualize, let alone execute. The shroud's most haunting quality isn't its age, but its eerie precision. The wounds align with Roman flagrum whips, the scalp bears puncture marks consistent with a crown of thorns, and the bloodstains show correct forensic patterns for crucifixion, details largely unknown in the Middle Ages. Forensic pathologist Robert Buckland noted the nail wounds pierced the wrists, not the palms, as artists traditionally depicted. Modern experiments prove only wrist bones could support a body's weight. How would a forger know that? Perhaps the shroud's power lies in its refusal to fit neatly into any category. It's neither fully proven nor debunked, existing instead in the liminal space between faith and evidence. For believers, it's a tangible link to the divine. For skeptics, a riddle wrapped in linen. But whether it's a miracle or a masterwork, one thing is certain. This cloth has imprinted itself not just with an image, but with humanity's endless struggle to reconcile the seen with the unseen, a struggle as old as the shroud itself. From the whispered prophecies of the Oracle at Delphi to the blood-soaked curses of Egyptian tombs, humanity has always reached for the supernatural to explain what logic cannot. These stories, scattered across continents and centuries, share uncanny similarities, as if some universal blueprint for the inexplicable exists deep in our collective psyche. Divine omens appear in nearly every culture, often as warnings etched in the natural world. The ancient Romans trembled at the sight of a comet, believing it heralded the fall of kings, while in Japan, the sudden blooming of cherry trees out of season was thought to signal impending disaster. What's fascinating isn't just the consistency of these omens, but how they reflect societal values. Where one culture sees a winged demon like Mothman as a harbinger of doom, another might interpret the same phenomenon as a divine messenger, like the Thunderbirds of Native American lore. The pattern is clear. When faced with the unexplainable, we mold it into a shape that fits our deepest fears or our highest hopes. Cursed objects, too, bind civilizations together in shared superstition. The Hope Diamond's trail of misfortune mirrors the tragic fates tied to China's infamous Bronze Bell of Zhou, said to drown anyone who rings it. In Scandinavia, the Viking bloodstones, weapons used in kinslaying, were believed to whisper to their wielders, driving them mad. Whether it's Tutankhamun's tomb or a humble antique mirror said to steal souls, these artifacts serve as cautionary tales about greed and disrespect for the past. But beneath the surface, they reveal something more profound. An instinct to assign blame to the inanimate when tragedy strikes, as if absolving human error through supernatural scapegoats. The universality of cursed objects suggests we've always needed ways to articulate the uncomfortable truth that sometimes bad things happen for no reason at all. Then there are the liminal beings, entities that exist between worlds, neither fully divine nor entirely earthly. Japan's fox spirits, or kitsune, straddle the line between trickster and deity, much like the Celtic fae who demand respect but offer no clear morality. The Americas have their skinwalkers, shapeshifters who defy the laws of nature, echoing the werewolf legends of Europe. These beings often emerge during times of social upheaval, embodying cultural anxieties about change and the unknown. The Navajo speak of the Chindi, a spirit born from a person's last breath, lingering where the veil between life and death is thin, a concept hauntingly similar to the wraiths of Scottish folklore. Whether as protectors or predators, these entities serve the same purpose. They give form to the formless, making the intangible dangers of the world feel tangible, navigable, even conquerable. What stitches these threads together isn't just shared imagery, but shared function. Supernatural tales are morality plays in disguise, teaching lessons about power, consequence, and the limits of human understanding. The Babylonian demoness Lamashtu, who preyed on newborns, reinforced taboos around childbirth, just as the banshees of Ireland warned against neglecting family ties. Even in modernity, we see this pattern persist. Slender Man, a digital age boogeyman, embodies fears of online anonymity and predatory strangers. The medium changes, but the message remains. These stories are mirrors, reflecting back the values and vulnerabilities of the societies that birthed them. Perhaps the greatest proof of their power lies in their adaptability. A vampire in Transylvania drains blood to symbolize aristocratic oppression. In modern Los Angeles, he's a metaphor for addiction or gentrification. The same ghost that haunted a Victorian manor as a lesson about repressed secrets now flickers through horror films as a warning about unresolved trauma. These narratives endure because they're not just about the supernatural, they're about us. They're the language we've always used to ask the hardest questions. Who are we? What scares us? And in the face of the unknown, what will we choose to believe? We live in an age where science can sequence genomes and photograph black holes, yet ancient mysteries still whisper at the edges of our understanding. The tension between modern rationalism and timeless supernatural beliefs isn't just academic, it's a battleground for how we interpret reality itself. Take sleep paralysis, for instance. Medieval Europeans blamed demonic hags sitting on victims' chests. Today, neuroscientists map the phenomenon to disrupted REM cycles and hyperactive amygdala responses. Both explanations describe the same terrifying experience, one through the lens of folklore, the other through brain chemistry. But here's the twist: knowing the biological mechanism doesn't erase the primal fear of that shadowy figure at the foot of your bed. Our hardwired instincts often override our educated skepticism. Forensic tools have demystified countless legends, yet some puzzles resist even cutting-edge analysis. Consider the Nazca lines, those massive Peruvian geoglyphs once attributed to alien visitors. Drone surveys and spectral imaging now reveal intricate construction methods, pegs, ropes, and careful planning, yet the why remains elusive. Similarly, DNA testing debunked the myth of the Yeti by identifying Himalayan bear in supposed hair samples, but locals still report encounters with the towering figure. This gap between evidence and experience highlights a fascinating duality. Science can explain how things happen, but it struggles to extinguish the stories that give them meaning. Psychology offers frameworks for why supernatural beliefs persist. The agent detection hypothesis suggests we evolved to assume intentional forces behind unexplained events, better to mistake a rustling bush for a predator than miss a real threat. Cognitive dissonance theory explains how people cling to ghost stories even after debunking. The emotional truth often outweighs the factual one. Yet these very mechanisms raise another question. If our brains are wired to seek patterns and agency, is dismissing all supernatural experiences as mere misfiring neurons itself a form of intellectual arrogance? After all, history shows us that today's superstition sometimes becomes tomorrow's science. Think of how ancient Greek theories about invisible atoms predicated modern physics. Perhaps reconciliation lies in recognizing that mystery isn't the enemy of progress, it's the catalyst. The same curiosity that drives physicists to probe dark matter also fuels ghost hunters' EMF meters. Both are searching for invisible forces shaping our world. When archaeologists used lidar to rediscover lost Mayan cities, they didn't disprove local legends, they validated oral histories preserved for centuries. Similarly, the placebo effect, once dismissed as just imagination, now reveals the very real power of belief to rewire biology. The supernatural, in this light, becomes a placeholder for phenomena we don't yet have tools to measure. What endures isn't a conflict between reason and belief, but a dialogue. The Voynich Manuscript still defies decryption by AI, yet that very resistance to understanding makes it priceless. The more we learn about quantum entanglement or the microbiome's influence on cognition, the stranger reality becomes blurring lines between natural and supernatural altogether. Maybe the answer isn't choosing sides, but embracing the paradox. We are storytelling creatures armed with microscopes, forever caught between the campfire and the laboratory, each illuminating what the other cannot fully reveal. What do these stories want from us? Not belief, not exactly. The tales we've wandered through today, from bleeding statues to vanishing colonies, aren't just relics of superstition or artifacts of their time. They're something far more vital, a conversation with the unknown that every generation inherits and reshapes. Some serve as warnings, cautionary tales carved into history's skin, like the curses of Tutankhamun or the chilling precision of the Oracle's prophecies. Others offer comfort, a promise that even in death or disaster, something lingers, whether it's the whispered secrets of the Bell Witch or the unquiet ghosts of Roanoke. But perhaps their greatest power lies in how they reflect us. The monsters change faces, demons become aliens, saints become extraterrestrials, yet they always embody the fears we can't name. The Jersey Devil isn't just a creature, it's the dread of wilderness unconquered. The Black Dahlia isn't merely a victim, she's the horror of ambition cut short in a world that preys on vulnerability. Think of how these mysteries evolve. The same communities that once trembled at witch trials now dissect cold cases with forensic tools, trading gallows for gas chromatography. But the impulse remains, to impose order on chaos, to stitch meaning into the inexplicable. That's why the Voynich Manuscript still taunts cryptographers, and why the Tunguska event fuels both scientific papers and sci-fi plots. These aren't just puzzles to solve, they're mirrors held up to our hunger for answers. When we speculate about the Sodder children or the Dyatlov Pass, we're not just chasing truth. We're rehearsing how we'd face the abyss ourselves. So here's the real question these stories leave us with. What will future generations make of our unsolved mysteries? What legends will they spin from Flight MH370 disappearance or the eerie hum of Taos? The supernatural divine isn't just about gods and ghosts, it's about the human need to find patterns in the noise, to believe that nothing, not even death, is truly random. That's why these tales outlast empires. They're not just history, they're the shadow history, the one written in question marks and goosebumps. Now it's your turn. Which of these stories lingers in your mind like an uninvited guest? The phantom airships of the 1890s, the silent scream of the Mary Celeste. Drop your favorites in the comments, and if you've got a local legend begging to be heard, this is the place to share it. After all, every mystery starts with someone brave enough to say, "I don't know, but I saw it." Want more journeys into history's hidden corners? Hit subscribe and let's keep unraveling the past, one enigma at